You're watching the Asset Management Technology and Reliability Trends Asset Management webinar, originally presented on September the 9th, 2021, featuring Don Berry, Principal Consultant from Asset Acumen Consulting. This Asset Management webinar is part of the Bridging the Gaps series of presentations sponsored by Asset Acumen Consulting, Inc. Welcome everyone to this Asset Management Technology and Reliability Trends Asset Management webinar. The plan here is to talk about asset management trends and the bottom line influence on disciplines in asset management. We're going to look at asset management and how leadership has a role to play, but also, frankly, how technology and the role of reliability has to play in successful asset management organizations. The plan here is to talk about doing some introductions, some corporate leadership. I'm not going to go through this list. You'll get a copy of this. You can look at it. Traditional values and truths about asset management, an approach to determining asset management corporate priorities, introduction to asset management, and this thing that I've been fussing with even when I was at IBM called an IT Continuum, IT trends specific to asset management. So these are the kinds of things that I'm going to talk about, but it really is more about the notion of the original topic that I talked about, which is asset management technology and RCM trends. For those who may not be aware of me, as I said, I've had 42 years in IT at IBM, 3 years since on my own. Pretty much all my career has been involved in asset management at some level. I was a maintenance tech in the mainframe space, and I'm an RCM2 practitioner, have a fairly detailed parts background as well, and have contributed to books. You'll see the one there, Asset Management Excellence, that when we were at IBM, we put out. And I have completed a book called Anatomy of Maintenance Parts Management Excellence, although to be fair, it's still in editing and should be published probably say in the next few months. Systems wise, one of the things I've learned since I left IBM is that there's a lot more to systems than maybe what I was exposed to at IBM, and I was exposed to quite a lot. There's organizations that basically have IT tools going after the smaller players. IBM clearly went after the mid-sized, bigger players. And the asset management itself is evolving into enterprise asset management and also into APM solutions as well, which we'll talk about. For those, again, who may not know me, I've also been teaching a physical asset management certificate program, or it was a certificate program. I think they just call it a program now, at the University of Toronto, and a maintenance parts program there as well. I've been teaching the PAM program, the physical asset management program, since 2004. And I believe the parts program for more than a decade. And just for those, again, who may not know what we've been offering, we have this PAM program, the physical asset management program, some asset management leading practices, RCM type training. I am aligned with Aladon, so I am an RCM2 practitioner. I have a maintenance parts course, which we're going to teach a small version of that in late November. And I have an IT and IoT in asset management seminar one day that's coming up in about a month. So those are the kinds of things that we've been offering. And I mean, the simple message, if you want to understand what's going on in trends, is it's really data, data, data. I mean, that's kind of where things are evolving for those who have started to commit to asset management. Organizations want to get return on assets across their asset life cycles. They want to reduce the consequence of asset failure, both safety, environmental, and operational impacts. They want to predict and mitigate conditions. They want to create and leverage asset-related data, and they frankly want more data. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And so it's all about data. When you think about it, though, if you have an asset, and I like to use a water bottle as my asset, if you have an asset, at the bottom line is you want this asset to create value, and to create that value, and in particular, that value may be in terms of production, or it may be in terms of customer experience. You want maintenance to be able to make sure that the critical assets are performing as needed. You need parts to support maintenance, you need procurement to support parts, and you need accounts payable to make sure people are paying the bills. And typically an enterprise asset management solution covers the maintenance parts and sometimes the procurement portion of those things. What we've been seeing, however, is that an awful lot of the organization's systems that they have simply don't talk to each other enough to have effective KPIs, and they certainly don't talk to each other enough to use KPIs as a way to respond. And if you look at a proper KPI exercise, You'd recognize that there'd be KPIs at the executive level, at the middle management level, at the supervisory or craft level, if you like, or also at the asset level. And so there'd be folks that would, there'd be KPIs you would look at in terms of all those things. The other thing to think about is when you look at basic RCM data, approximately 11% of the components of a complex asset fail over time. So we're not going to get into the RCM stuff in detail today, but if you look at assets basically fail 6 different ways. They may either fail early and then random for a long period of time, and then the probability of failure goes up again. So that's failure pattern A. There's a failure pattern B, C, D, E, and F. But the truth is that only about 11% of components on a complex asset fail over time. And the other 89% are random over time. And so that's the intent of these graphs, is to kind of say, well, if it's flat, that's random, we can't predict it. Or it's going to be high early in the case of F, but it's random over time. And so what do you do with the things that are random over time? Yes, the 11%, you can just say, okay, every 3 months, 6 months, whatever it makes sense on a particular asset, you can pick a period of time and say, that's what we're going to do. But you need to sort that out. So the opportunity now is to kind of say, well, let's look at the 89% and get some sort of early indication of failure. And if we can get some sort of early indication of failure before it fully fails, then perhaps we can, correct the asset potential failure position before we're not in production. And so with that kind of scenario, what we used to do, 10, 20, 30 years ago was inspect. Now you have an opportunity to have some sort of sensor. There's more opportunity to put kind of some sort of sensor, either process sensor or vibration sensor or whatever, to kind of say, hey, we're starting to have some degradation here, and give me early indication of failure. So we're starting to recognize, and this notion of RCM failure patterns has been around for at least 30, 40 years, but a lot of people haven't been that aware of it. We're starting to recognize that you wouldn't necessarily have to just do inspections, but you could also perhaps put some sort of technical solution on there to get some early indication of failure. Why do we do that? Well, we do it because it's about money. We bought the assets to actually drive value, and that's why we exist. We bought these assets to create value. And so to the degree that the assets can actually be utilized, if I have a fixed asset and I get fixed asset utilization, that's probably the best way to drive value, assuming there's a market for whatever that asset is creating or whatever customer experience that asset is contributing to. We can also do it by contributing to the physical cost of maintenance. If we can improve how we execute maintenance, we can improve that. Or in this case, MRO inventory means maintenance parts inventory. If we can improve the parts we need to stock, where we have the parts, how we actually use the parts, all those things are very tangible opportunities to save money and can contribute directly to the bottom line. The other issue is, however, though, that there's some intangibles, or opportunity, perhaps not issue, and the opportunity to improve sustainability, our reputation to the organization, health and safety kind of things are all considered health and stability issues as well. Environmental contributes to sustainability. If our assets are running and we have better data to understand what assets are running and where we spend our maintenance dollar, we have better financial control. And if we have a better understanding of how our assets are running, then we have a better supply chain. And if we have a better supply chain, we can meet our commitments more likely to our customers. Therefore, we have improved customer service. So those are, I say some very basic ones. There's probably a good dozen of tangible and intangibles, but those are some of the very basic ones in terms of things that you could look at. Now, since I've somewhat more a little independent from the big blue IBM, I've started to read some third-party reports and learned, for instance, from Forrester quite recently in April of last year or 2 years ago, when they went out and asked clients, do you have the resources you need to look at your assets to understand if you're managing your equipment costs right? 78% of them actually said, no, they don't. We lack the people we need. So there's clearly both a need for people, and I would argue there's also a need for process to understand how do we actually get the people we need. So 64% believe their costs are rising. 60% believe their unplanned downtime is growing. 68% believe downtime impacts their bottom line, which is kind of what I'd implied, that if your assets aren't running, then that could impact your profitability. But to address these things, such as equipment life cycle issues, a lot of them are still thinking it's breakdown maintenance, break fix, or in both 71% and 78% in terms of field management solutions, PMs, time-based maintenance. You see a slightly reasonably not good number in terms of thinking it's condition-based, but generally speaking, what I'm finding out there is people still don't recognize why things fail, and they don't have the data to help them manage that. Forrester went on to look at people, equipment, skills, and customer experience issues, and said, look, as we're looking at this to solve it, we're not trying to get rid of maintenance craft. We're actually just trying to be more efficient, effective, and safe, and certainly not remove our maintenance craft. 75% of those companies recognize that their focus on technology will influence the type of skills they need. So they're going to maybe slightly skew the types of people they need. 97 say they're finding it a challenge to find the right skills. That's not new. There's been reports on that for years, that we just simply don't have enough of the analytic skills out there in staff. There just isn't enough, no matter what country you're in. About 88% are looking to increase their craft skill set with digital skills, and about half are challenged to find the people that they're looking for. 80% realize it is about data. Almost 90% say it's about prioritizing the data. 84% say it's about agreeing that the data they have and they're collecting is the right data. Are we collecting the right data? How do we collect the right data for the next 5 years? And also collecting customer experience insights to understand these are who we're serving. How do we do that with the assets we have? Now, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, the notion of Industry 4.0. I'm not going to take you through this too much, but it's grown. We've gone from Industry 1 to 2 to 3, and now 4.0. And 4.0 is mostly about the notion of Internet of Things and collecting data and being able to utilize that data and leverage that data, and also the need to adapt. So if we need to adapt in Industry 4.0, one of the key things here is, I took a quote from Darwin. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is the most adaptable. And so it's all about understanding what data we have and what markets are we serving, what's our competition, how do we shift, if you like, or change to make, or adapt, if you like, to make sure that we can continue to grow our markets while we do this. At the bottom, you see a line here that says leaders need to be seen leading. The number one thing that I'm seeing in organizations is that leaders that recognize that they need to be leading and maybe even put the right people in place, but then often go off to focus on other things while those right people are still trying to make those changes happen, and leaders are not left to be seen leading. And so you need people to be engaged, you need the leadership to be there to make sure that people are engaged, that kind of thing. So supporting an agile and adaptable culture in asset management generally means establishing an innovation strategy and a culture. And it is often about culture, because culture can hurt you if you're not trying to drive that and nurture that as well. Embracing the attributes of a reliability journey and culture, supporting a flexible IT infrastructure to support the asset management tools, advanced analytics, IoT, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And with all that, obviously, you have to develop and empower your people. We have to make sure that these folks continue to grow with your organization. Not adapting could mean becoming extinct. And that's why I elected to use the Charles Darwin quote. Another thing to think about is just culture itself, and made me think about Peter Drucker. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we can go out and strategize, but we need to make sure the culture is there ready to move with the organization. A lot of organizations I've been involved in have merged. And so you end up with multiple cultures that aren't ready to understand what they're going to be when they get together, or maybe not ready to do that. Maybe leadership, as I said, they're off doing something else. I put them together, now I'm off doing something else, not ready to actually commit to that. So culture is a big part of this, and you have to make sure that you help both the leadership and the organization get to the change. And to do that, you often have to help them understand why we're here, what are we trying to accomplish, and what are our priorities to get these things accomplished. So we need to get the leaders aligned. We need to include our staff to understand what the priorities are and help them internalize why the priorities are what they are. Understand where you are and what the journey should include, both near term and long term. To get IT and OT, which is IT, hopefully you know what that is. OT is operations technology, and the maintenance team aligned to support each other. And it really takes a community, and you need to start. I mean, otherwise you can continue to just be in either doing nothing or analysis paralysis. You need to get started and give your folks and your team and your leadership a sense that you're on a journey, and that journey is going to take you somewhere that you all want to be. A powerful, empowering culture is a surer, if that's a word, route to organizational success. So that brings me to a pyramid that I've been using. It was originally a PricewaterhouseCoopers pyramid. IBM adopted it. It came out in a couple of books, including the Asset Management Excellence book, which I was a contributor to as an author. And this notion of 10 elements of the Maintenance Excellence Pyramid, which are listed here. It involves foundationally strategy and management. It involves materials management and KPIs and maintenance execution, which you're calling planning and scheduling and tactics, and data management, which you see here, I've highlighted in red on the right for data management IT. It also involves reliability center maintenance and TPM, total productive maintenance, or otherwise known as autonomous maintenance here. And it also involves the notion that everybody has a culture to understand how to redesign the process and make sure things are moving. So with that in mind, we would take an organization through the notion of looking at where they are, what they're trying to accomplish, to look at how they're doing things today, to review the as-is process and interview those impacted, analyze and present the results. So we take them through a process that ultimately, I'm not going to walk through this whole process. So as you go through this process, you would end up with a high-level plan of implemented priorities. You define what that solution might look like with some defined success criteria, perhaps, not perhaps, but definitely have a timeline, and then build some sort of business case that would have in it the governance model, the prioritized initiatives, the collected defined benefits, high-level implementation plan, which is basically a macro plan and a macro budget. So those are things that in my career and both way back in PricewaterhouseCoopers days, IBM days, and since, and it sits quite highlighted in this book that's noted in the bottom of this chart, we've been doing for a few decades. If you were to try and look at just your systems, it's interesting to recognize now that even the folks that traditionally had basic EAM are adding to it. So they might have basic work management, they might have some mobility capability, they're certainly going to have some basic asset management capability, some data analytics, and they might even have some enhancement tools, either to collecting some production data, understanding where the assets are, if your assets are linear, understanding how to calibrate things such as tools, if that's what you're trying to manage. Some, for instance, in health and safety or healthcare products need a lot of calibration. Oil and gas needs a lot of calibration, and understanding what return on asset is. Also, the EAM solutions are starting to evolve by industry. So you're seeing things like utilities and oil and gas and manufacturing, life sciences, healthcare, nuclear power, transportation, aviation, civil infrastructure, and service providers, all those things. You could have an EAM solution today that is basically tailored to a specific industry, which may or may not align with what you're trying to do, but that's how they're going to market. Now, if you were to talk to Gartner suggests there's actually three main products out there: the Enterprise Asset Management EAM solution, which I've already talked about, the Asset Performance Management solution, which we're seeing a lot of folks evolve to, and the notion that if you have an asset, you need to plan the life cycle, investment life cycle, and plan for the life cycle investment. And that's called asset investment planning. So you're seeing a lot of those products out there. I'm going to focus a little bit on APM and EAM throughout the rest of this discussion, and say that asset management is being supplemented with the three solutions like EAM or solutions, EAM solutions, if you like an EAM such as Maximo, IBM's Maximo, which is what I'm somewhat familiar with, have been the focus of most asset responsible enterprises over the past decade, but others are evolving. So EAMs are now starting to have API or APM type things added to it. And in some cases, the EAMs are starting to add APM and AIP rather capabilities into their solutions. So they're either going to say, yeah, you can bolt on to us, or we're starting to have those kind of technologies as well. Yet from another perspective, we're seeing other things grow. The notion of mobile technology, the convergence of IT and OT coming together, a lot of the operations data and asset systems data, data, analytics data is going to grow. We don't know where to put the data, or we don't know where to put the systems. So we're seeing a lot of it be put into a cloud, and there's a lot of growth in artificial intelligence. So of all these listed technical influences, all of them do create a need to manage new sets of data. And so the new word, even though I'd like to think that we're maintenance and like to think that we're wrench turners, it's becoming a data game. And what is the right data, and can we get the right data? To give you an idea of some of the technology, I'm not going to go into this too deeply, but just the notion that we have Internet of Things, we have IT and OT convergence, we have mobile, which is more related to situational awareness. We have data analytics and big data, we have cloud, we have artificial intelligence, machine learning, or cognitive computing. And there's many more. I've just decided to talk about 6 of these, or suggest there's 6 of these out there. And so when you look at your business, how do you actually put it together? How do I describe why we're here? How do we drive value? What is the customer experience we're trying to support? Yes, you're probably going to have to buy some assets and manage that investment planning over the course of the asset life cycle. And at some level, this has to start with some notion of strategy. Now, I'm not saying you do nothing without strategy. On the other hand, if you're going to spend, a lot of money, i.e. millions and millions of your organization's money, you might actually want to spend a little bit of money and make sure you're doing the things that you need to be doing now to prioritize that spend. And the kinds of things that could be focused on, and this is not an exhaustive list, is somewhat listed here. You're going to see some notion of work execution, or reliability analysis, or planning and scheduling, or data model valuing, or asset performance management, looking at external sensors and connecting that through the IoT, all the way up to actually integrating my assets, my critical assets, to why my organization exists. And my organization exists presumably to create some sort of supply chain value. And so how do I optimize that supply chain value? Interestingly enough, IDC put out a survey again in 2019 that captured this notion of going from CMMS all the way to something that's why we strategically exist. And I'm not going to read all of these, just to say that you could be manual, you could be doing something on a spreadsheet, you could be doing something in a computerized maintenance management system, you could be using an EAM solution, which I would argue is still all these, going from manual to CMMS to an EAM is just improving how you maintain your assets. It improves the efficiency of it. None of these things really tell you what to do. And it's not until you actually do something like reliability centered maintenance and collect that data and put it somewhere that you're actually focusing on the effective thing to do. And so that effective thing to do is often found in, notionally now, what Gartner is calling an asset performance management solution. And then ultimately taking that up to, how do I automate that against my operational IT, OT type conversions? How do I integrate that to why we even have the assets in the first place, and why do we exist as an organization? So there's this arrow, if you like, that things are evolving up. From that, I created a somewhat simplified asset management and an IT continuum. The notion of going from manual to efficient to effective to being strategically aligned with why we exist. And to support that would be manual or enterprise asset management solutions, or asset performance management solutions, or maybe some data analytics, machine learning, AI solutions, including automation, all having to be supported by an asset management strategy, all having to be supported by IT, because it's going to be so IT supported in intense. And none of this is going to happen if we don't bring our people. So we need change enablement, and read into that change culture. We need to make sure that we bring our people. So one of the data things I discovered last year was, especially somebody who spent the bulk of their career in IT, was to learn that, gosh, of all the organizations out there that have assets, and this is a study done by Upkeep, so maybe they were very focused on, a certain size of organization, but of the organizations they looked at, they said 61% of the so-called asset intensive organizations are still managing their assets manually. So there's a huge opportunity to go and take those markets that are not really even introduced to a CMMS or introduced to an asset management solution, enterprise asset management solution, and going after that market. So there's certainly opportunities for that. So that's at the one end of the spectrum. When you look across the different spectrums, whether it be CMMS, fixed asset software, and I've just taken different studies that I've been able to glean out of the off the internet, the markets are there, going from anywhere from a couple of billion to 25 billion, if you like, ultimately in a year over the next few years between now and 2025. And so the market's there for these folks to grow. Where are things growing? Sorry, if I go back to that previous chart, you see that things are growing. APM seems to be where the markets are suggesting the bulk of the money and growth is going to be, which is people are starting to wake up to the notion that we're going to need better data analytics, better data to tell us what to do, which is the effective thing to do, versus the efficient thing to do, which is in the EAM solution. So with that, I wanted to talk about, well, what does that really mean? Well, it really means that if I'm going to populate an asset performance management solution, a lot of that's going to be reliability center maintenance type data. And if I'm going to populate it with reliability, it's not the only thing, but it's a lot of it. It brings us to this notion of, well, what are people doing that are not focused on RCM? And there's been organizations I've walked into that we talk to them and say, look, there's a lot to do here in RCM. And they kind of go, yeah, we're reliability focused. We do it all the time. When you talk to them, what they have is good intentions, but they're not really looking at the data. They've not really done the analysis. So what they've typically done is created an asset baseline health metric. They identify, or in many cases, not in all cases, the bad actors. They've created some defect elimination teams. They perform lessons learned. They challenge current tactics and maintenance plans, and those are all good things. They review backlogs. They encourage this total productive maintenance type culture, which again is good, and challenge missed scheduled activities. Now, when you think about that, even if I look at that list, I would say that probably not even 25% of the organizations I walk into are doing all of that. But the point is, you need to do all that, and that's not enough. You need to be doing more, because bridging the foundational approach to asset reliability and reliability centered maintenance means that you're going to be trying to proactively understand, what are my critical assets? How do I create the right teams to give me the right decision grids out of that? That's usually maintenance and operations and design engineering working together. To calibrate the standards through training for the reliability team. So do we all have the same rules? Are we all calibrated to the same terms and discussion? Have we created, or can we create facilitators in our organization so we have our own people understanding why the decisions were made that way? Pilot a few reliability analysis, including failure modes, effects analysis, create the knowledge and related data that goes with that, and create thresholds for flagging actions, and document the reliability data and tactic plans in your solution, in your EAM. That's assuming your EAM can carry that data. If it can't, then you want to put it in an APM, and then get management to commit to the new plan. Now, that sounds great. How do we do it? Well, it takes a group of folks: facilitator, maintenance and operations supervisors, an operator, maintainer, and specialist, defining what the asset operating context is. And out of that, you get asset data, location, risk references, operating. You wouldn't get operating context in an EAM, but you might have location at least. You may, if you put some time to it, put some risk references to it. But generally speaking, you haven't documented primary and secondary functions and what your standards operating contexts are. Standards in operating contexts are. Generally speaking, failed states, you want to know what the functional failures are, or failure types. You want to know the failure modes, effects analysis data. And below here, and I'm not going to go through it, you'll see a lot of the opportunity to actually create data that you could put somewhere, and that could influence decisions. Bear in mind that when you do data analysis, when you do machine learning, when you do AI, all of these things are based on algorithms or evolved algorithms from what they've learned. And so wouldn't it be nice to have all these things populated, because we've come up with a proper base? When you understand the consequence of it, you would actually have understand whether there's a safety impact, environmental impact, hidden impact, operational impact, or non-operational impact. And you could actually now prescribe what the proper mitigation is. Is the solution that we're going to suggest technically feasible and worth doing? Is it going to be a predictive, preventive, run to fail, inspection, redesign, or some combination of those above 5 things? And then reliability process data, we start to collect a bunch of data that we in fact can use and put somewhere, along with all the other data points that we've collected along the way. Now, I said there's basically only 5 things that are outcomes from an RCM exercise: predictive maintenance, preventive maintenance, failure finding tasks, which is basically inspections, no scheduled maintenance, which is basically run to failure, and redesign, which is basically one-time change. And you can collect all that with or put all that against the data that I suggested we would collect on the previous chart. If we've done that, you now have the opportunity to take that foundational piece for people that maybe have maybe not done all the things I listed earlier on the left, and now start to put all that RCM stuff in there that we talked about and get to that point, and now actually prepare yourself to do some good data analytics and start to collect and bring in more things with IT and IoT reliability execution. You can integrate the asset health, transaction, and reliability threshold data. You can include market demands and other external data, whether it be weather, for instance, to influence asset maintenance schedules. You can start to prepare to leverage IT and artificial intelligence to automate a first pass of RCM. Now, that's a bit of a controversial topic. I would suggest you'd only do that after you've really got the discipline right, because frankly, I don't think you can still trust IT to do any of this unless we've mitigated and curated the data and curated the questions to make sure we get what we want from it. And then have perhaps an RCM analysis actually curate it and say, yeah, that's the right approach. That might help us a little bit faster. And then ultimately support the reliability culture that is automated to drive asset value through strategic operational optimization. Now, just to take all of that I've just showed you, none of these bullet points are different, and just putting it on a chart in a different order, in a different way. It's kind of this evolution. I can go from my base foundational reliability culture saying, well, we feel like we're doing reliability things, but we're not really doing RCM. I would argue you still need to do RCM. You can't really just jump up to IoT enabled and IT enabled. You need to have that discipline to curate the IT and IoT stuff and get to that point. And if you do that, then you're going to have your data. You're going to have the data and the things that your data scientists need to be able to curate this data, both asset operating context, failure modes, effects analysis data, mitigating tactics and thresholds, and how to automate some of those decisions from reliability data insights. And if you do that, not only will you get some of the benefits that I'm suggesting are here at the reliability centered maintenance level, but you're going to get that very quickly. You're going to, the time to value is going to be accelerated because you've taken the time to do that. Okay. So I've gone through that very quickly. I just want to go through another point here, and that is back to this asset management continuum. If you were to take that and say, well, what does that look like in perhaps a different set of details? Well, basically, there's a number of things I could do, whether go from manual all the way to enterprise asset management systems, and maybe even some automated planning and scheduling. And all those things really do is help me become more efficient. If I take the time to have risk and reliability analysis done, i.e. an RCM group, and then take some of that data and do some condition monitoring applied in the right place, take the sensors and the expert systems, again, applied in the right place, and automate some of the asset performance and asset investment planning. Now I'm starting to do what things I should be doing efficiently. So the effective thing to do efficiently. And if I can take those things now and start to take that and line it up with some operational business data, I can start to be a little bit more predictive asset optimization, start to be a little bit more prescriptive, and actually start to prescribe to my supply chain what optimal things need to be done. So you can go from this notion of what's your percent planned and how do we improve planned to how do I go from planned to predictive and how do I automate that? And if I can do that, you're definitely moving the ball. It's a huge paradigm shift in terms of where your business needs to go. The notion of work and asset management would be there. Asset optimization would be addressed. prescriptive asset management to be addressed, prescriptive operations management to be contributed to, and that's because you're integrated and contributing to an optimized supply chain. So that's the vision. Bearing in mind, I've already told you that there's a lot of folks that are still manual, but what's the overall vision and where might we take this business and how do we drive that business? So how can asset managers address this basically? Well, you can take perhaps some of that early strategy stuff that we talked about, validate current landscape and pain points by business unit, do some sort of asset management leading practices workshop, understand what kind of solutions and tools you have today, decide how much of this roadmap, if this is the roadmap you want to take on and how much of this is going to work for you, and then start to build a blueprint and plan to go do it. I mean, that would be the simple approach. Okay, and along that would be perhaps artificial intelligence, likely things in the cloud, contribute to IT and OT convergence, and no doubt we'll have some Internet of Things involvement in that. Bear in mind, there's a lot of work to be done. So you're going to see a lot of swim lanes kind of hinted at the bottom right, and there's going to be a lot of financial gates required hinted at the bottom left. Okay, now this is not a project I worked on. I saw a presentation, I somewhat modified it, but basically as an example, manufacturing in Industry 4.0, Toyota, I just saw this presentation a couple of weeks ago. They're clearly committed to a ton of these IT things in their promotion. I'm not going to try and explain it to you. I wasn't the presenter, but they're doing all these things as well as looking at AI and machine learning and wearables and robotics, obviously, and automotive manufacturing and inspection assists. So this is not new. This is just what's the continuum you want to be. And yet when I look at what Rob or Gary said at Toyota, he said, look, we're doing some business intelligent things. We're doing some business analytic things. But what he didn't say is he's not quite there. This is my term now. He's not doing what I would call the IT OT convergence for business optimization. Certainly doing some IT and OT for sure, but not quite taking it to the top model. So there's room to grow. And so the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't really matter where you are. There's lots of opportunity for growth here. Okay, now I think I'm at a point now where we're going to see a video. Okay, hopefully you're still there and I didn't put you to sleep with that video. Next steps. What do people need to do for next steps? And then we'll go to, or I'll look at some questions here. Well, check out their culture. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing. Try and understand where the leadership are they aligned? What's the culture? Do they need more training? Do they need to do an assessment? Do we need to get IT in the room and asset management leadership together? Quite often, they're not on the same page. And that's kind of what that video was trying to imply. Acquire and implement IT solutions. What is you're going to acquire? What's the right solution? Where are you now? Where do you fit that going forward? How do we embrace 4.0? Because not embracing it means you're not going to be competitive typically, or any one set of the above. And so that was primarily what I wanted to cover today. I do have just a quick make you aware, I'll come back to this question thing here. Sorry, this notion that there is another free seminar. The September 9th one's happening now. There's one on parts on October 21st. And then there's also some training. Excuse me, probably the main one you want to look at is the University of Toronto one. It's a 5-day program. All of these are ones that require a fee. But if you're looking for a fairly intensive, well-regarded, been around, I've been helping Professor Jardine teach this class since 2004. That'd be one to look at. The brochures will be on the link. And also the IT and IoT in asset management, which is a whole day just talking about technology. That's on October the 7th. And then maintenance parts, it's a 2-day program that for those or some of your colleagues that might have some parts background interest, that'd be something to look at. So each one of these requires a bit of a fee, but you can look at that and decide whether that makes sense to you. All right, so now we're at the notion of questions. I'm going to stop the share and see if I can't see if there's any questions here. Will I be sharing the recording? Yes, once I get it edited, because we've had a few people that didn't have mute on. Somebody asked me to go back to the previous slide, but I obviously didn't see that. And somebody asked if they missed the beginning. Are there any questions? If you want to unmute, we've got a few minutes. If anybody's got a question or two, maybe we can take that on until just the top of the hour, which is about 3 minutes away. Thanks for the heads or the thumbs up. Rebecca. Any questions? Well, okay. I will say this: if you do have any questions or you want to give me contact me, just send me an email. I think you all have my email because I would have sent you the invite. So just let me know if there's any questions you have, any other things you might be interested in. Also, let me know. I'd love to know if you have any interest in any of these other courses, the U of T course, the IT and IoT, or the maintenance parts course. If you have any colleagues that need to understand parts, that would be great to get them involved in this. I can tell you now that all 3 courses have been highly regarded when they've been taught in the past and the recent past. You've been watching and listening to the Asset Management Technology and Reliability Trends Asset Management webinar presented on September the 9th, 2021, featuring Don Berry, Principal Consultant from Asset Acumen Consulting. If you wish to hear more about this, please contact us or contact Don Berry at donmberry@assetacumen.com. Thank you for listening and watching.